Welcome to our second session of Deserving, and in this session today I would like to explore Ahimsa. Ahimsa in yogic teaching is nonviolence, or could also be translated into compassion. And compassion is my preferred way to look at Ahimsa. And the idea that in order for us to have compassion for others, we must first have compassion for ourselves. In order to do non-violence to others, we must first do no violence or harm to ourselves. So if you'd like to join me in a seated shape, I'm sitting on my bolster. I have a nice blanket supporting my knees, but you can sit in any way that is comfortable and supportive to you. And we'll start just with a little bit of grounding before we get into some standing shapes. Oh, which reminds me, if you have blocks, those could really come in handy today in class, as well as one or two blankets, as always, maybe even having your bolster nearby if you want it for later on in class. So having all of the things that you need to support you, and then finding whatever seat that you prefer. If you would like to take your eyes closed, you could, or you might decide to keep your eyes open, perhaps staring down the bridge of your nose on an unmoving spot. Allowing all of your awareness, all of your energy to focus inward. You don't have to sit still. If you need to adjust, if you need to sway, if you need somewhere to put any excess energy, please do so. And if it's helpful, you might even take a body scan. Not to fix or do anything about what you find, but just to start to bring awareness inward. So noticing how your body feels right now in the present moment. Maybe even noticing how your breath is moving. You might even notice that just by observing your breath, just by bringing awareness to it, that your breath naturally changes, and that's okay. You don't have to force yourself to breathe in any particular way, but if your body naturally changes its rhythm, then that's more than welcome. Staying here with our bodies and our breaths for another 2 rounds, just feeling what we feel. And then if you'd like to, with this last breath, add a little bit of breath to your next inhale. You might do so, and maybe even take a big exhale out of the mouth if you want. I'd like to get into just a little bit of movement before I offer you our focus and intention for class today. So if you'd like to join me in inhaling and reaching the arms up, you might lengthen through your spine, maybe take a few wrist rolls. If it feels welcome to kind of move through your rib space, you could. And if you are ready, you might inhale, reach your arms open into a T shape, and maybe even draw your heart space forward like you're stretching your arms back. You might even lift your head, open your throat a little bit. And then as you exhale, kind of like a bird closing its wings, you might start to flap your arms forward, maybe allowing the area behind your heart to stretch open. Taking a few more of these different cat-cows, inhaling open as if you're sending your wings back. Exhale to close. Taking these shapes in a way that feels right to you. They could be smaller than my shapes. They could be bigger than my shapes. You don't have to do what I'm doing at every moment. You could always change your mind, choose for yourself in this moment and in every moment of class. As we take our last one, opening up. Maybe you reach your arms up overhead and exhale. You could find the floor with one hand, maybe leaning over with your top arm, finding a side stretch and peeling the ribs open. Allowing yourself to find center whenever you feel complete on that side. Maybe taking the other side. And if you'd like, you might take 1 or 2 more rounds on either side, kind of like a windmill, a little bit. Going back and forth, inviting some fluidity into this moment, into your body, knowing that this practice doesn't have to be rigid. And if you're ready, you might find center, maybe reach your arms up one more time, and then settle your hands and arms down wherever you'd like. Option to take a few shoulder rolls. Maybe even exploring some space in your neck, whether that be stretching or maybe even taking your hands and gently massaging your neck, your shoulders. Anything goes here. What does your body need? And we'll be here for another 2 rounds of breath. Whenever you feel complete, you could meet me at center, wherever that center is for you. And I invite you to explore a mudra with me. A mudra is a seal that we use to direct the flow of prana, the flow of life energy in our bodies. And this one today is called Garuda Mudra. Kind of rhymes. But you would take your thumbs together, kind of like you're creating a bird with your hands. And then just touching your thumbs together lightly. And you could rest your hands over your heart space. This seal invites freedom. It reduces anxiety. It connects us to our heart center. And it also inspires passions and curiosities and the discipline that's needed to pursue those things. But today, my focus is in the heart center. And so as you hold this seal, if you choose to, because you could always leave your hands in your lap or anywhere else that feel welcome, I invite you to hold this seal and receive the passage I'm going to read. And this is by Deborah Adele in her Yamas and Niyamas book. She writes, "We can have hearts that are full of love for others and intentions to love that are pure. But the truth is, we will express that love for others by treating them the same way we treat ourselves. Love lies at the core of nonviolence and begins with love of self. Not a love that is egocentric, but a love that is forgiving and lenient. A love that sees the humor in the imperfections and accepts the fullness of the human experience. Only when we find this love for all the parts of ourselves can we begin to express fully the love that wells up inside of us for others. Finding this love for all the parts of ourselves means we have to forgive ourselves. Without forgiveness, we carry guilt like a heavy burden around our hearts. Guilt holds our love for self and others hostage and keeps us bound to a one-sided expectation of the human experience. I cannot say this enough times. Our ability to love and accept all the pieces of ourselves creates ripples, tiny acts of violence that have huge and lasting impacts on others. Our inability to love and accept ourselves is what creates tiny ripples of nonviolence, prevents us from loving others. Notice here what comes up for you from that passage as you hold this seal upon your heart. Is it perhaps the idea of forgiving yourself that strikes a chord? Or the idea of receiving love that is lenient and forgiving? Or maybe it's the idea of accepting and loving yourself, every part of yourself. Or perhaps a different part of the passage. What is it? What comes up for you right here, right now, that your heart is just striking a chord with that passage? And I invite you to create an affirmation on whatever's coming forward for you. And I'll offer a few, depending on what that might be. But just know that you can always create your own. Whatever is in your heart, whatever you need right now. One option is, I deserve love that is forgiving and lenient. I deserve love that is forgiving and lenient. I love and accept every piece of me. I love and accept every piece of me. I forgive myself. I forgive myself. And if any of these affirmations strike true, but maybe don't feel totally true, and it's difficult to receive them, you might insert at the beginning of the affirmation, I'm learning to accept and love every piece of myself. I am learning to receive love that is forgiving and lenient. I am forgiving myself, or anything else that might be what you need in this moment. So I invite you, as we finish up this grounding, to take a conscious breath into your affirmation. And then if you're ready to release the seal, our mudra, you might release it. And if you are ready to move out of your seat, you could join me in a tabletop shape. Option to use a blanket underneath your knees, if that is something your body would appreciate, like mine would. And here, when we come into our tabletop shape, you have a couple options. Option one, you could find some organic, intuitive movement, starting to feel into your body. Option two, you could start to take some cat-cows, maybe inhaling and allowing your spine to drape down toward your mat. As you exhale, you could round the spine up toward the ceiling. And then option three is to take like a fluid kind of movement. So I like to inhale, release my spine toward the floor and send my hips back, almost like you're coming into child's pose, but not quite. And then rolling forward like a wave, exhaling, shifting myself forward. And then inhale, allowing my tailbone to lead. And kind of creating this wave-like motion. So 3 options. Take what you need. Release the rest. And we'll be here for the next 3 rounds of breath. Couple more, taking your time. You choose what your practice is today. I'm just here to provide options, but at the end of the day, at the end of this practice, every choice is yours. And I celebrate every single one of your choices that you make for yourself. If you feel complete here, you might start to slowly come back to center. Option to take a child's pose, maybe by touching the toes back behind you, allowing your hips to sit back toward the heels. They don't have to touch, but just in that direction. And then maybe release your forehead down to the mat, or perhaps keeping your gaze lifted, maybe stacking your fists, placing your chin on your fists, allowing your gaze to stay open. And as always, if you would appreciate a little bit of extra covering here, you could take a blanket and just drape it behind your hips as you come forward in child's pose, opening it up as much as you need. So option 1 is child's pose. Option 2 is to tuck your toes, lift your hips, finding a downward facing dog. What does your body need today? Do you need a little bit more rest? Do you need a little bit more stillness? Then child's pose might be what you need. Do you need to burn up a little bit more energy? Do you need some activation? Then maybe you meet me in a down dog. And as you're in down dog, you could move through it how you want. So you might release one heel to the floor, swapping it out for the other. You might kind of sway from side to side like your heels are windshield wipers. We'll be here for the next 2 rounds of breath. And if you are in child's pose, you might start to find your way into a tabletop if you feel complete there, because you don't have to rush on if you aren't done. And then if you are ready for the next shape, you could start to bring your right leg up towards the ceiling if you are in down dog. If you're in tabletop, you can just extend it straight back. And then starting to bring your right knee in and planting your right foot on the floor, finding a low lunge. And just kind of taking a second here to adjust. Blocks are very welcome here, especially if the floor is feeling kind of far away. If your back knee is feeling kind of tender and the blanket just isn't very thick and you need a little bit more, you could always fold your blanket again or add a second blanket. So take a second here to set up. We don't have to rush. This practice can be what you need it to be, and there's plenty of time to make it that way. So here in your low lunge, taking a second to feel. One more breath here. And I'm actually, you don't have to do this, but I'm going to turn on my mat so that I end up facing you when we come up. All right. So from your low lunge with our blocks nearby, you could begin to tuck your back toes, lift up on your back knee, and start to walk your hands over to center. So we're pivoting our feet with us. We're coming into this really wide forward fold, our prasarita. So we have our hands on our blocks. If you have them, you don't have to have blocks, but it is helpful to have them here. And notice that you have multiple different heights. So we have our very tall height, medium, and low. So adjust to what you need. And then here, if it feels welcome, you might start to bend one knee and then the other, just allowing the hips a second to open up. These can be big movements, small movements. And then when you feel ready to come back to center, with our feet pointing forward, our heels nice and grounded in the floor, you could start to inhale here. This will be our halfway lift with our hands on the floor or the blocks. Our spine is kind of like a tabletop spine. We'll breathe in and exhale to take a forward fold if you're ready for it. Only going as far down as you want to. Inhale, halfway lift, lengthening through the arms, the spine. Exhale, forward fold. Let's take one more just like that. If that calls to you, because you could always pause in any way. And exhale, take a forward fold. Option to stay here as long as you want if that's serving you. Or you could inhale, come back into your halfway lift and really engaging our quads here. You might bring one hand to your hip and then kind of press up and away from your blocks, coming up to standing. Couple options here. Option one, you can leave your feet as they are, feet facing forward. And when we come into our standing shapes, it would be a different shape. So option one is to inhale, reach your arms up. Exhale, lean to one side. Maybe your right hand comes to your right leg as you come into this more traditional triangle pose. Option two is to take our, I guess it's still a traditional triangle pose, but that's just what it was called when I was taught that. So the other triangle pose is to allow your right toes to face the short side of your mat. So we're adjusting our right leg and our left leg can stay as is. Inhaling the arms up. And then as you exhale, you might allow your left hip to send out over to the left, having a block next to your right shin, bringing your hand down to the block, and then reaching your left hand up towards the sky. So we have triangle number one and triangle number two. You can decide for yourself which one feels best for your body, turning your gaze either to the floor or straight ahead or up toward your left thumb. And you might choose to stay here longer, or if you'd like to reverse your triangle or lean in the opposite direction, if you were in the first triangle option, you could inhale, press on up. Exhale, left hand can come to your left leg as you reach your right arm back. If you'd like to create a fluid movement from this rather than stillness, you could inhale, swing in the opposite direction back to our triangle. Exhale, reverse. Inhale, triangle. Exhale, reverse. Let's take one more. If you're in the fluid movement, if you're in stillness, you can keep doing what you're doing. All right, and then inhale right back to center. Let's move our blocks. And if you're ready, you could adjust your right foot if you were in triangle number 2, so that both feet are facing forward again. And we'll inhale at our halfway lift position. Exhale to take a fold. Inhale to lift. Exhale to fold. Option to pause in any of these shapes or take one more fluid motion with me. Inhaling to lift. Exhaling to fold. Option to pause in this fold for one full breath, or you can always return to the halfway lift option. If and when you're ready to lift back up, I'll meet you at our halfway lift. And we'll find a low lunge over on the left side. So you can take your blocks with you as our left foot points forward. We're allowing the right leg, right foot to follow. Finding our low lunge here. Pausing to adjust. Take your time to really set up. You don't have to rush through this. I invite you to bring your affirmation to the front of your heart, the front of your mind, offering yourself a love that is forgiving and lenient, offering yourself acceptance. And with your next inhale, you might begin to tuck your back toes, lift up on your back knee, and I'll meet you back in our wide fold. So taking your blocks to the side, we end up with our feet facing forward, nice and wide. Option to take 3 halfway lifts and forward folds with me, or finding stillness in either shape. So inhaling, halfway lift. Exhale, take a fold. Inhale, halfway lift. Exhale, let it go whenever you're ready. Last one. Okay, so from our halfway lift shape, you might take one hand to your hip and then engaging your quads, really engaging your legs, doing some work here, pressing up, coming into our standing shape. And again, you have the option for triangle number 1, which is feet stay facing forward. We're not moving our feet, we're just reaching from side to side. Maybe you pause on one side for a while, maybe you go back and forth. Option 2, now it's our left foot that's facing the short end of our mat, and our right foot that is staying as is, maybe even kind of pigeon-toeing the right foot in a little bit if your right hip is feeling a little pinchy, a little bit weird. Okay, taking your block to your left leg, right by your left shin. Option, if you're ready to, if you want to, you could reach your arms up overhead. Exhale, you might allow your right hip to head on over to the right as your left hand comes down for your block and your right arm reaches straight up from your shoulder. Your choice of where you put your gaze. Breathing here. If you'd like to reverse your triangle, you could take a deep breath in, strongly reaching your right arm up towards the sky, and then right hand to your right leg, your left arm reaches back. Go only as far as you want to. Maybe you find your way back down in your triangle. Option to take some fluid movement, just as we did before, or, as always, you could find stillness in either shape. Can you move with love for your body? Can you move with love for yourself? Allowing these shapes to be a celebration of who you are, of what you have come through, of what you can do, of where you're going. So we take one more fluid movement. And exhale. Whenever you're ready to meet me back at standing, I'll meet you there. Adjusting your legs if needed, bringing your feet back forward, hands to your blocks or your floor, or the floor. As we inhale, halfway lift. Exhale, fold. Option to take two more with me if you want to. After your last one, option to hang out here in the forward fold for just a breath or two, if you want to. And then pressing yourself up whenever you're ready. You could start to head on back to the top of your mat, sending both legs back. Knees can come to your mat, and then finding a child's pose. That was a lot of work for our legs, a lot of small muscles around our ankles and our feet. So checking in, noticing what's present for you, physically and energetically. Another 4 or so rounds of breath here, taking your time, noticing how your breath starts to come back to center. Last breath here. You might choose to stay here in this child's pose for as long as you like. There is no need to hurry out of it. And whenever you decide that you are ready to move out of it, you might start to lift your head, walk your hands back, and crossing your ankles behind you, and then sitting your hips back so that we end up in a cross-legged shape on our mats. And here, if you find that it's difficult to sit up straight with your legs crossed like this, if it feels like you're kind of falling backward, then a nice little support would be your blanket. So you might take your blanket, fold it up into a square or a little thicker into a triangle, and then just sit on it. And that's all that you would need for a little bit of height. If this blanket is not enough height, you can stack a second blanket, or you could always use your bolster. We are going to be exploring a forward fold, and how far you come forward is not the goal whatsoever. But if you find that you would appreciate a little bit of support in front of you, if there is a couch nearby, or a bolster, or or even like the side of your bed, whatever it may be, if it's just helpful to have that support to kind of catch you when you come forward, then you can kind of scoot up next to your couch or whatever's in front of you. Even a coffee table, if it's low enough, you could put your arms and your hands on it. So adjusting as needed, and then finding center in your seat. With your next inhale, I invite you to find some spaciousness in your spine, maybe exploring floating the spine up towards the sky. And then as you exhale, you might start to walk your hands forward until you can't go forward anymore, or your body says, hey, this is good. And then option to round into your spine, maybe bringing your elbows down to the mat, or allowing the couch or whatever's in front of you to catch you, supporting your upper body there. If there is nothing but floor in front of you and your head is just kind of like hanging, option to place a block underneath your forehead. We'll be here for the next 5 rounds of breath. Three more rounds, breathing at your own pace and your own timing. Last one. As always, you have the choice to stay here longer. Or if you're ready to leave, you could begin to take your time, slowly lifting the head, walking your hands back. And we'll pause at the top for just a moment. Checking in, seeing how you're feeling. And then looking down at your legs and noticing which leg is in front. Is your left leg in front or your right leg? And we're going to change the cross of our legs. But if your legs would appreciate a little bit of stretching out first, option to do so. Just kind of keep in mind which leg was in front. And then changing the cross of your legs so that the one that was in front is now in back. Then you can set up again, and I'll meet you right at center, finding that expansion in your spine, whatever that feels like in your body. And then with your next exhale, starting to find your way forward, going to the spot that suits you, using whatever you need, a block, a bolster, a couch, coffee table, anything to allow this shape to be a little bit more supportive. and we'll be here for another 5 rounds of breath. Two more rounds of breath. Last one. If and when you're ready to start making your way out of this shape, I'll meet you at the top. So we just kind of pause for a moment, noticing how you feel. If you're ready for the next shape, I invite you to find a reclined fish pose, and this will be our very last shape of the class, and also where I welcome you to take your Shavasana, your final resting shape. And if being in this shape just doesn't feel restful, you don't have to do it. You can set up in any other way. But I'm going to show you 2 different ways to set up. Option 1 is to use a bolster. If you have a bolster, you could lay it on your mat long ways, and then facing away from your bolster. It's helpful to have a little bit of space in between. If your lower back is pressed up directly to the bolster, it's going to provide a really not deep, but the longer that you're there, the deeper it feels, back bend in your lower back. And that's not exactly the goal here. I'd like to open up through the chest a little bit more, but you can choose for yourself. If you'd like a little bit of opening through your lower back, you can be closer to the bolster. If you'd like a little bit of more opening through your chest and your heart space, then having a bit of space, enough space to kind of send your hand through. And then leaning back, you could have your legs extended. You could have your feet planted on the floor. You could always have butterfly legs, so having the soles of the feet touching. It really doesn't matter how you have your legs. It's completely up to you. If you don't have a bolster, it'll be the exact same thing, except for taking a blanket, rolling it up so that it's like a nice cylinder, kind of looks like a burrito. And then same thing, laying it on your mat, long ways, setting up that way. So you choose whatever you have on hand or whatever you prefer. You could start to find your way into this reclined fish pose, the supported fish pose. Or any other shape that you prefer. And we'll be here for the next few minutes, about 4 minutes or so, just resting. And before I enter into a time of silence to give you that space and time, I invite you to take a cleansing breath, if you want one. Inhaling through your nose, big exhale out of the mouth. Then allowing your breathing to return to any natural state, any rhythm that just feels right. And perhaps bringing your affirmation to the front of your mind one last time. And I'll read to you the passage that I read at the beginning of class. And then I will be silent for the next few minutes, but just know I'm still here with you. We can have hearts that are full of love for others and intentions to love that are pure. But the truth is, we will express that love for others by treating them the same way we treat ourselves. Love lies at the core of nonviolence and begins with our love of self. Not a love that is ego-centric, but a love that is forgiving and lenient. A love that sees the humor in the imperfections and accepts the fullness of the human experience. Only when we find this love for all the parts of ourselves can we begin to express fully the love that wells up inside of us for others. Finding this love for all the parts of ourselves means we have to forgive ourselves. Without forgiveness, we carry guilt like a heavy burden around our hearts. Guilt holds our love for self and others hostage and keeps us bound to a one-sided expectation of the human experience. I cannot say this enough times. Our inability to love and accept all the pieces of ourselves creates ripples, tiny acts of violence that have huge and lasting impacts on others. You could choose to stay here for as long as you like. If you are still receiving this rest, please stay in it until you feel complete. Whenever you decide you are ready to move out of this time of rest, you can find your way either to a side-lying shape or a seated shape. Really being gentle with yourself as you ease out of this. Staying in this place of rest as long as you can. I thank you for allowing me to guide you in class today. Thank you for practicing with me. And I hope that you feel safe, connected, and at home in your body.